I think, unfortunately, in social media and in our broader culture, when we see something on the surface, we immediately are led to believe that it's a flaw that we need to correct, to fix, that there's something wrong with us, that we're broken in some way. And I would really flip that script around. And skin symptoms aren't an indictment, they're information.
Welcome back to the Push Pause to Heal podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Rodersheimer. On this podcast, we explore health from the inside out, starting with the foundations, connection, and the conditions that allow the body to heal. Today's guest is Dr. Keira Barr, a double board certified dermatologist, somatic therapy practitioner, and founder of the Center for Mind-Skin Medicine. An award-winning expert in the mind-skin connection, she helps women decode the messages their skin may be sending about stress, hormones, and overall health so they can feel more at home and at ease in their own skin. That sounds amazing. Dr. Keira is a sought-after speaker and media expert who has been featured in outlets including Vogue, Mind Body Green, and Oprah Daily. She's also the author of the international Amazon bestseller, The Skin Whisperer, which helps readers understand what their skin may be trying to tell them. Welcome, Dr. Keira.
Thank you.
So glad to have you here and so excited for this conversation.
Same.
You know, when we first met, I was so excited to learn about your specialty, which I had never heard of before, psychodermatology. Can you break that down for us, what that means?
Yeah, isn't it fascinating that as physicians that we don't even know about each other's specialty, but essentially it is the intersection of skin health and mental health because there is such an overlap. I think just in practical terms, anyone could probably relate when something shows up on your skin that could create a sense of worry or fear or anxiety or just what the Yeah. And so what we see can impact how we feel, and how we feel can impact our thoughts, behaviors, actions, and our physiology.
Wow. Yes, that's a great breakdown. And I'm just curious, how did you come to find it, or what brought you in that direction yourself?
It's fascinating when I look back, actually, the essay that I wrote to get into dermatology was actually all about that connection, about the lived experience of someone, and even my medical school essay, actually, because when you go all the way back, I know it's like I'm old. There's a lot of stories.
I was going to say, for me, that's quite a ways.
Yeah, it is quite. But I have learned over the course of my life and my career that your mess becomes your mission. Yeah. And as a kid, I was bullied for birthmarks on my face. They were cafe au lait spots. Kids cruelly call them coffee stains. And those kids, God love them, they were assholes, but they were right. Right? Because cafe au lait translated is literally coffee stain. So I learned at a really young age that our skin could be a source of shame and embarrassment and humiliation. And it really, I shapeshifted. As a young person, I learned how to adapt, how to fit in. And the way I learned to fit in was getting suntans, sunburns, to mask and hide them. And it also led me to being more of a people pleaser and perfectionist and all the things. And I didn't realize that, our biology becomes our biography in many ways. Fast forward, I'm in medical school, and it was fascinating. I love pathology. And so dermatology is this beautiful mix of internal medicine, peds, cosmetics, all the things. But the through line of that felt experience of what it's like to live in the skin of ours always stayed with me. And so fast forward, I become a dermatologist. I'm in my career. My own health starts to fall apart. My own skin starts to change. I was an ultra marathoner at the time, lots of sun exposure living in Northern California. So growing and changing moles. And I found a spot on my own arm. Wow. And as a skin cancer melanoma specialist at the time, it was very humbling to look at it and be like, okay, that's not okay. So it was biopsied, and as the subspecialty that I had trained in is dermatopathology. So I was always looking at skin on the surface and on the cellular level, always curious about what's happening beneath the surface. And sure enough, it was early melanoma. And that was the first wake-up call that our skin knows. Right? Our skin knows of all the load and all the stressors and all the changes and everything we're trying to navigate. And it may be the first place that we see it, but it isn't the root cause per se. It isn't where things start. And so it led me down this fascinating rabbit hole because my health started to unravel a lot more after that, and connecting the dots. And so it just kept leading me back to all the connections and really how the skin can be a messenger in many ways for us to get really curious about what's been happening beneath the surface, whether it's present moment or all the way back to your childhood. Very long-winded explanation, but this path for me was lifelong.
Wow, really starting in childhood. Thank you for sharing that very vulnerable story. I think most of us have some sort of story similar, maybe not in relation to our skin, but a time when we were made to feel that way. And the skin is like a very special and unique part of our body. It's an organ, right? And it's really like the only organ we can look at, right? With our bare eyes and what we have to show the world. So I think it is a special kind of intersection there between, what's happening and what everyone gets to witness is happening to us. So thank you for sharing that. And I would love to have you break that down a little bit more about how the skin is a messenger. Like what can our skin tell us about what's happening beneath the surface?
Yeah. It can tell us a lot. And I think it's really important. I think unfortunately in social media and in our broader culture, when we see something on the surface, we immediately are led to believe that it's a flaw that we need to correct, to fix, that there's something wrong with us, that we're broken in some way. And, I would really flip that script around. And skin symptoms aren't an indictment, they're information. Their information, because the skin, as you said, it is an organ. It is the largest, most visible organ. And simultaneously, the skin is so nuanced and complex because it is all at once a sensory organ, has immune function, endocrine function, neural function. So it is a neuroimmunoendocrine organ in and of itself. And from our embryology, it is derived from the same layer of tissue as our nervous system. So it has this bi-directional communication at all times with our nervous system. Wow. So our skin is constantly, and our body essentially, is taking in information from our external environment, sound, sight, smells, UV exposure, air pollution, inside our body, hunger, thirst, fatigue, nutrient levels, toxic load and such, sure, and the interpersonal field. And all of that information is being appraised and synthesized and assessed by the nervous system, right? To determine safe, not safe. But the skin at the same time is doing the exact same thing because everything essentially comes in contact with this boundary. You said it earlier. I forget which, you said intersection, but I would offer the word interface. It's an interface between our internal world and our external world. And it's also a sensory neuroimmunoendocrine interface. So our skin is giving so much information about what's happening inside our body, what we're being exposed to outside our body, and it's responding to all of those inputs in real time. That's what blushing, flushing, goosebumps are. Yeah?
Yes. Well, gosh, I just have so much more respect for my skin right now than I did a few moments ago. Like I have not thought about, all the things that it's doing for us at every moment. And what a blessing. One of the things I absolutely love is when I have a guest come on who reframes a thought or a belief in a new way that I haven't really heard before. Or maybe my listeners haven't heard. And that's the skin, when it's reacting or erupting or whatever word we want to use. It's actually just information. It's not you said it's not an indictment, it's information. And that's changes the whole paradigm of like, oh my gosh, what's happening to me, to actually allow us to have some skin in the game and some power or agency to, right? So I didn't even know I was going to say skin in the game. That wasn't planned.
Skin, right?
Literal skin in the game, but to have some agency to say, okay, how can I like interpret this message and do something with it instead of just living in the fear or chasing another potion or, thing along those lines. So I don't know if you want to chime in on that, or that was just,
yeah,
that's what came up for me as you were talking.
No, I love that. I love that so much. And yes, like in other words, like your skin isn't this report card. It's information, and it's a doorway into a much larger conversation happening inside the body, right? So and the skin isn't just showing when things are going wrong or when we're under duress, right? The skin also lets us express the vitality, the joy, right? When we say someone's glowing, right? That's an inside, like that erupts from the inside out, right? And it's expressed. So it goes both ways. So this skin that, and I'm sure, I know you had another guest on, a dermatologist, right? And in conventional dermatology, we talk about disease and what to do at the surface. But just to expand that conversation, I'm not anti-medication at all. I think it really needs to be a both and, directly addressing what we're seeing on the surface and also the lived experience of the person living in that skin. And too often it's either or, and we're always chasing a fix when really the curiosity is like, well, why is treatment necessary in the first place? What has this system been exposed to? Does it have the resources and the resilience in order to respond? Because we're wired for adaptation. Like that is how we survive. But oftentimes things show up on the surface when our reserves and our resilience has been depleted because we've been asking our system, all our different systems, endocrine, immune, all that, to withstand a lot of load, right? So it's all those inputs, inside, outside, and in between, that are constantly coming at us. And the curiosity is, well, if something is showing up on my skin, what might I need in this moment or in this season of life to support my systems to meet the demand? And when the demand exceeds our capacity to meet it, that's when we feel exhausted. That's when we see signs and symptoms of chronic illness. We see flares of psoriasis, eczema, our autoimmune conditions flaring. So it makes sense when we put it in that context. And I never understood that until my own health kind of hit the crapper. And I was like, oh, I don't have 10 different diseases like everyone's telling me. I have an overloaded system with maybe 10 different expressions. Letting me know that it's too much, too fast, too soon, and I don't have the resources or reserve to meet it.
I love that. That's so common in our culture, is just go, push, do one more thing. The to-do list is a mile long, and we feel bad or guilty for taking a rest, which is actually why my podcast is called Push, Pause to Heal, to like remind people, like, our bodies aren't robots. We cannot treat them that way. They really have needs and a capacity, like you said, that if we push beyond, and for in the case of this conversation, a lot of different skin things, but I think everybody has something, right? Like for me, it was my joints. If I pushed beyond the capacity of my body, I would get a flare up of my joints. And I think that, some people, it's headaches or gut symptoms or whatever the case may be. And so if we come back to the idea of building this capacity and respecting the limits, right? There are limits to our body, like what it can do in a given day. Like, I just think that's so powerful. So I just love that. I love what you said. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit, like, specifically. So as we talk about, maybe stress or this load that we put on the body being bad for our skin, can you help us understand, like, physiologically what's happening between the nervous system and the skin when we're under stress?
Yeah. So I also think it's important to define what stress is. Yeah. Because
Sure.
stress inherently isn't a bad thing. We categorize stress like distress is something that we would not have. It puts us under, you know, uncomfortable duress and strain. But there's also eustress. It's stressful to pack for a vacation or get ready for, a wedding or what have you, but it's something we're looking forward to. And so that can be different. And we are wired to adapt to stress. Yeah. If we look to nature, right? Sunshine is a stressor to the plants and they grow towards it. Like we need stressors in our life, but there's a difference between stretching and like straining in terms of stress. But in terms of, in addition to that, I would say when we talk about stress, I think we only talk about like mental emotional stress, which is a big part. But again, the nervous system and the skin are always taking information in from inside our body. So, hunger, thirst, like that interoceptive, the felt sense inside the body, the environmental inputs, and then the interpersonal. So all of those can be considered stressors. So some of us have sound sensitivity, light sensitivity, there might be gut health, nutritional deficiencies. All of those are stressors. And so they can activate the stress response. So the nervous system, right, our autonomic nervous system, our central nervous system, with activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, with release of stress hormones and inflammatory signaling. The skin is part of what we call the NICE network. So the skin and the nervous system, as I mentioned, are connected. They're like twins. Like they're from since before we were born, communicating. So the nervous system, the skin, the endocrine system, and our immune system are talking to each other all the time. So when there's activation of the stress response, all of those systems are taking marching orders from the nervous system that has determined there's a threat, we need to mount a response. What most people may not know is that the skin itself has a stress response mechanism. It has its own version of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So when the nervous system determines not safe, not only is the skin participating in the greater global, but the skin itself is capable of producing cortisol, inflammatory signaling, stress hormones, and such, shift in the microbiome. So the skin is both a target and a source of the stress response. So for instance, that was a very long-winded explanation, I apologize, but
No, that's
for
great.
instance, like with acne, right? So common, whether you're an adolescent or you're a midlife woman whose hormones are changing and all of a sudden you're breaking out and you're like, why is this happening, right? We know with stress in particular, cortisol, primary stress hormone, stimulates those oil glands, increases sebum production. It also shifts the microbiome. So we've got dysbiosis. It slows down skin cell turnover, clogging those hair follicles because acne is rooted in the hair follicle, and it increases inflammatory signaling. So stress is essentially amplifying the four major contributors to acne. This is why we see when we are stressed, we might break out. This is it all starts to make sense when you see like what are the conditions, what are the circumstances that the skin, the environments that the skin is trying to adapt to.
Wow. That's great. Yeah. I have never really thought of it that way. So very eye-opening. Thank you for that explanation. So would you say the skin is actually part of the stress response system rather than just reacting? It's all one system.
It is both reacting and responding. So the skin is like
Okay.
listening and speaking at the same time because it is directly connected to the nervous system and that part of that NICE network. It is responding to that centralized stress response. And because it has its own hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and capable of producing its own stress hormones, it's also a source of the stress response.
Got it.
So it's kind of like a double whammy. It's a target and a source. So the skin is, listening to what's happening in the body and also speaking right back to the nervous system. So this is why we can get caught in a vicious loop, because when we are, there is stressors of various sorts that we are being exposed to, and the capacity, the load might exceed our capacity to fully meet it. The skin may flare, and then seeing that the breakout in the mirror may create a secondary activation, because now we're seeing something, we're stressed out, people are going to judge us. How did this get here? What did I eat? What did I do wrong? What am I going to do to fix it? Activate the stress response again. So you go round and round in this loop.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm glad we have you here to help us understand it. Can you explain why a skin flare might happen after a stressful event is over? Like, even, we've all had that situation where you're like cramming for finals or whatever, and the big event is done, and then suddenly we're sick, or we've got a flare up of our acne, or whatever the case may be. What's going on there?
Yeah, I think, our conscious story and our physiology don't always operate on the same timeline, right? We're really good at functioning and kind of pushing through. You mentioned that earlier, especially there's so many high functioning individuals out there. We are really good at getting the job done. And again, we are wired for survival. And so we will, the nervous system will shift to, when the nervous system picks up a cue of threat or danger, whether that be you've got a deadline or, there's, just too many things happening all at once. The first response is one, to kind of look around for help. Can anyone help me? Like, can I get out of this in any way? If we can't, the first activation of that stress response is that fight or flight reaction. And we will try and fight, we will try and flee and use up as many resources to push through as long as we can, right? We got through the deadline. It's over, we think we're fine. But if it's been going on for too long with too little support, the reserves and the resilience have been diminished. And the body does exactly what it needs to do, which is slow things down to conserve energy in service of our survival. Yeah. And so our resilience to rebound, I should say, to kind of go back to our baseline it's not quite there yet. So this is why, even though we got through the thing, we don't feel stressed. The system doesn't necessarily have the reserves. So this is where we might see that we're a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more prone to irritation and breakouts, even after the stressful event is over. Our physiology is still kind of reacclimating, readjusting, and may need additional support to kind of come back towards health, growth, and restoration.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you talk to us about, so many women we've tried every cream, supplement, diet, wellness protocol, to try to fix a skin problem, because it is so weighs so heavy, So what might someone be missing when we try to keep fixing the skin and looking and, trying the latest thing? What might we be missing?
Yeah, I think, we've touched on it a little bit, because sometimes the missing thing isn't another intervention. It's really getting curious about what might the system need to expand its capacity to respond to what life is already asking of it. So I think oftentimes it's not doing more, it's actually, apropos of this podcast, can you push pause and get curious of like, what might I need right now? Maybe that's rest. And for those of us, I'm calling myself out, like, rest doesn't come easy. Like, just laying on the couch and doom watching, it's not doom watching, but I'm just totally sacked on the couch, like watching Netflix. That is not fully restful because my mind is still going. Yeah. So finding simple ways to rest, like you invited me to do right before we started, right? Just feeling your feet on the ground, just allowing your gaze to soften and maybe look out on the horizon. Maybe we need to set firmer boundaries. Maybe we need to look at what we're consuming, not just food-wise, but on our social media feeds, right? Like sometimes it's not the next diet supplement protocol. It's what might I be able to take off my plate? Mm-hmm. What do I need to really feel at ease and at home inside of myself to find a little comfort in my skin? So yes, we might need medication, but we also need to really get curious and offer ourselves a little grace and understand ourselves as the person experiencing it. And that, I think that's been the missing piece. Big pharma is highlighting the problem, that there's a big psychosocial burden, especially with skin disease. We know that stress is an issue, loneliness is an issue, but no one's offering the solution. And I feel like that's kind of why I love doing this work, because no one was offering it to me, and my health fell apart. And if I'm a physician, I didn't know any of this. How is the average person supposed to be able to get the support? Everyone says, manage your stress. Most people walk out of their derm offices or their doctor's office and be like, great, I'd love to do that. How do you do it?
Yeah.
So then they might try meditation, or sit and breathe, but great tool. Wrong time if you're already feeling activated and anxious, and then you feel like a failure. And that keeps the loop going. So being able to teach people to understand their own nervous system states, how it feels for them, to know what their triggers are, and to offer them the right tool at the right time to meet themselves where they're at, oftentimes is like, truly that missing piece.
Wow. There's so much that you just said that was so powerful. I want to just highlight, like, I think we're sort of set up to not to expect like the pill, the cream, whatever, right? Like everything you see on social media, we've got commercials on TV telling us, oh, you just need to take this pill or a shot or whatever, and your life will be grand. So I think our expectations are off because of what we've been fed, right? So it's hard when it looks like it's so simple, but there's really a little bit more work to it, right? Which is exactly how I feel. And what I talk with clients about for all manner of things is there's not a magic pill shot. I mean, there's always yeah, right. It's not that simple. Our bodies are so intricate and beautiful. So let's go down this avenue a little further, if you don't mind. This was a question I was going to ask you closer to, farther down the list, but you brought up the idea. So you're a somatic therapy practitioner. I would actually love for you to explain what that means. And then maybe we can talk about some somatic practices and, the time and the place for them. And, because I think you're exactly right. People hear, oh, I need to work on my stress, or I need to do things differently, but like, how the hell do I do it? Right. So do you mind telling us a little bit about, I'll let you just run with that, I guess, and answer that question for me.
Yeah. And again, before my own health fell apart and I started learning about this, I didn't learn about this in medical school. That is for darn sure. So soma, it means body. So somatic is basically working with the body, the living body within. And, we've been led to believe that our mind is separate from our body, thanks to Descartes, right? But and many of us do live up here. We can intellectualize, and that's not a problem. That's also a brilliant adaptation and coping strategy. If we can make sense of something, if we can find some semblance of control, if we can think our way out of it. But the problem is we can't. Because when we are in a stressed state, as Dr. Dan Siegel, he's phenomenal psychiatrist who's really given us so much, right? Like his hand-brain model, and when we are stressed and overwhelmed, right? If this is the representation of the brain, like we flip our lid, and then this is our emotional brain, our amygdala, and this is like running around a toddler unsupervised running around with scissors. It is hard to reason with a supervised toddler running around with scissors, right? So we can't get our lid back on just by thinking about it. That's where the body comes in, right? And part of it is if your audience, I would imagine, is also familiar with the vagus nerve, right? So the vagus nerve, this wandering nerve that starts at the base of the skull and wanders down. It's like the longest cranial nerve. It has connections with the facial nerves that innervate the muscles of the face, our social engagement system, our throat, our heart, our lungs, our belly. 80% of vagus fibers are what we call afferent. They're sending information, sensory information from the body to the brain, not the other way around. So 80% of the information that the brain is kind of taking in and deciding how all the other systems are supposed to function is coming from the body. So we have to bring the body into the equation, what they call a bottom up and a top down, right? So we can think, thoughts are important, but the body is really where we're getting so much of the information of what's happening inside of us, how what's happening outside of us is impacting what's happening inside of us, and then being able to work with that. So bringing the body into the equation, especially when we flipped our lid, is so important to bring it back online and integrate mind, body, left and right sides, all of it.
That's wonderful. So can you give us some concrete examples of how to do that?
Yeah, so probably one of the simplest practices really of and somatics too is similar to mindfulness, right? Being in the present moment. What is happening inside of me in this present moment? So it's a matter of presence. So anything that we can do to help bring us into the present moment. I think the fastest way most people would say is bring awareness to your breath. Our breath is always with us. It's happening below our conscious awareness, but we can bring it into our conscious awareness just by paying attention to it, right? Am I breathing? Most of us, when we are overwhelmed or stressed, we may not appreciate, we might be holding our breath. We might be breathing a little bit more shallow in our chest. And so the invitation is, first, just bring awareness to it. Am I breathing? Right? You don't have to change the pace or the rhythm. Am I breathing? Yeah. And then notice, where do you feel that breath? Do you feel it more in your chest or your belly? When I say that, I immediately just want to breathe a little bit deeper. And then the invitation is, could you inhale through your nose, feel your belly expand, and then as you exhale through your mouth, and feel your belly contract. You're just following the rhythm of your breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And if you can, just extend that exhale just a little bit longer than the inhale, because we know that activates that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and relaxation response. This is a calming breath. There are a lot of other techniques, especially if you're a little anxious or amped up. A calming breath may not be what you need, right? So we can use other breathwork techniques where we're, kind of fogging up a mirror, like, like a lion breath, to move that stuck energy through. So our breath is one. Movement is another. So a key thing too is if you're sitting in meetings, sitting on Zoom, you can't necessarily move your body. You can swivel a little bit, but eye movements are really key. Our eyes are directly wired into our brain, and our visual system takes in a lot of information. So we can do what we call orienting, exploratory orienting, allowing your eyes to kind of just wander where they want to wander, looking around your room at colors, textures, the shapes, and see if you can find something that feels pleasant or maybe even neutral or sparks curiosity. And if you find that object that maybe makes you a little curious or reminds you of something, just pause there for a moment and just let yourself take it in. And then notice what happens to your breath. Notice what happens maybe to any tension in your body. Orienting is one of the most potent and powerful and simple practices you can do anywhere, anytime, even when you're talking to someone in a heated conversation. I always find it so fascinating when I invite people to do that, right? And they're looking around at something, and I had a client, he was looking around the room, and he noticed the electrical outlet, and he started chuckling. I was like, "That's interesting. What's coming up for you?" And it reminded him of his very first job in high school. He was like an electrician. He was an electrician. He wasn't really an electrician apprentice, but he was shadowing someone, and it made him think back on this fond memory of his mentor who would just joke with him, and just by looking at the light, the electrical outlet. And this was an individual who came in, tightly wound, feeling overwhelmed and anxious, right? And just by creating the time, space, and permission, right? The beauty of this podcast, to pause. And it was an instant, stroll down memory lane that created levity and joy and that vitality, because the brain doesn't know the difference between now or then, which is a good thing sometimes in a moment like that. But that's part of what gets us into the overwhelm, is because we forget that what happened back there, back then, isn't happening now. And our body has a response to that. And so these simple practices can remind ourselves, wait a second, no. This is adult me. I'm here right now. I can breathe. I can feel my feet on the ground. I can see my environment now. This is very different than then. And I'm safe enough in this moment right now. And that can make a huge difference to turn the volume down on that stress response, which could then support creating the conditions conducive for healing across the board, but especially for skin health.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I know I feel different than I did about 3 minutes ago before you led us on that journey. So thank you. It's so important to have some takeaways, some tools in this busy world where we can, just implement something as simple as looking around the room and kind of focusing on something that can really take us out of our head and bring us back into our body. I love that. So thank you for sharing. For me, sometimes if I'm swirling in my head and I really want to come down, I like to put my hand on my heart.
Totally.
That's
like my go-to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That really connect, like, oh yeah, I'm in here. Like there is something under my hand. I'm not all a brain, right? Or thoughts. There's more to me. So, but I love that. So thank you for sharing those things. And when we shift over, like what I just experienced in those couple minutes, and I think the listener probably did as well, the shift from into this new state where there's a little more peace, a little more ease and relaxation, that's the space, and I think you would agree with me, where the systems of the body function optimally. Do you want to chime in on that thought, or that's the point, right?
That is the point. And when we talk about, I think, there's on social media, it's all about nervous system regulation. And I think regulation is, the systems are regulated. They are functioning in their more optimal state. But regulation is not the same as being calm. And I think that's really important. Yes, we can feel, after that practice, feel a little bit more easeful, a little bit more relaxed. That's a beautiful byproduct, and it often happens. But nothing has gone wrong if you're not feeling calm. You can be regulated and angry or grieving, right? It's being centered, and the whole point in this somatics is, can I stay connected to me when I'm engaging with you or with the experiences around me? And so I always think of, Debdina has her polyvagal ladder, right? I think of the nervous system more like an elevator. It's just helpful for me to think of it in that way, because an elevator moves up and down constantly, right? And an elevator can get stuck, like that emergency button. So the penthouse, or that top floor, is that state of health, growth, and restoration, what we call our ventral vagal state. It's where our systems are functioning more optimally. We feel engaged, we feel curious, we feel present, right? But if there is a threat or a sense of danger, whether that's all the emails in our inbox, the bills are piling up, we're falling behind in clinic, or whatever, your flavor of that is, right? Alarm bells start going off. So the elevator drops to that middle floor, which is the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, right? Our heart rate speeds up, our mind speeds up, our breath might speed up. And this is where there's release of the cortisol, and we might see flare and flushing and breakouts and aches and pains and what have you. And we try to fight it off or flee. And if we can't do that in service of our survival, the elevator is going to drop into the basement, that dorsal vagal state, conservation of energy, things slow down, there's chronicity of conditions. We are barely, we are surviving, but don't necessarily feel like we're thriving. And so what helps that elevator move is that activation of that vagus nerve, right? To get that the goal isn't to always be in the penthouse. It's fluidity and flexibility to move between those states with more ease. And that is because we need to be activated at times, right? Are you okay? I went down the wrong way.
Yes, excuse me.
So many of these practices that we just talked about, right? Like breath work or movement or visual. And I use touch all the time. And what I loved about what you said is touch makes so much sense. And it's what I teach about a lot, because touch is the first sense actually that we ever developed. And in the womb, it developed like at the skin surface, our little lanugo hairs, those fine hairs that we form on our skin. At the base of those are these specialized nerve endings that, the amniotic fluid just, gently rock them back and forth, which is why movement feels so good, that gentle rocking. But it's also, touch is the first language that our system spoke before we had words, and skin is the first site of where that language was spoken. So when we can use gentle, soothing touch, doesn't always have to be stroking, but it, like feeling our edges and things like that. It helps that elevator not get stuck on those middle or lower floors. It helps move us back up towards that penthouse, towards health, growth, rejuvenation, and allows us to move to those other floors where we need to be in order to meet the moment with the appropriate needed response, right? But in chronic and illness, oftentimes, we tend to get stuck on those middle and lower floors.
That's a great analogy. That made it so much clearer to understand. Thank you for sharing that. Circling back to kind of the skin and someone struggling, when you've spent years feeling like your skin or some part of your body is betraying you, how do you start to begin rebuilding trust?
Yeah, that's a great question. Slowly. Right? Slowly and with curiosity and compassion. And I think curiosity is really the very first step, because especially with skin issues, most of us will scrutinize, we'll look in the mirror and we'll criticize and see what's wrong, right? But hopefully, if we, zoom out for a second and understand that the skin is this interface of sensory, neural, immuno information, relation. The skin is a relational organ, right? It's in relationship with everything inside our body, outside our body, in the in-between, through touch. From that lens, hopefully, it starts to make sense. Like the dots start to connect. And so it becomes easier to be really curious, like, okay, so what is all the data? What's going on? Versus, this is a problem, right? That my body is betraying me. The body has taken in all this information. It's trying to make sense of it and respond in the way that it thinks it needs to in service of your survival. It's really, it's doing things that we may not like. It hurts. It doesn't look the way we want it to. It doesn't feel the way we want it to. But when we understand that every system is talking to each other and it's trying to coordinate its responses with the resources it has under the load that it's carrying, it's doing the very best that it can. And from that context, oftentimes, at least with the women, I work with men as well, but majority women, the light bulb starts going off of like, wait a second. You mean my body isn't against me? You're telling me that all these things is really because my body is just overwhelmed or overloaded, and there's something I can do about it? Okay. Right? So I think we just back things up a little bit and start to, like there's an intelligence, but I get it. Like when you're in pain or you've been struggling with something for years, like, yeah, of course it feels like your body's betraying you. I have felt that a million times, but I also realize I have been putting a lot of stress and strain on my body. And I can't do anything about my genetics, but I can oftentimes do some things, enough things to change the environments inside, outside, in the interpersonal with boundaries, to create environments that are more conducive for my system to maybe have a little bit more of a opportunity to settle, to pause, to take a break.
I love that. I think if there's a takeaway there that I just want to pull out, that if we can take the symptom, whatever it is, a skin eruption, in my case, it was a joint problem, swelling, maybe it's a headache, a gut symptom, and just be curious about it. I love that word, curiosity. I was speaking to a client this morning about being curious, because it just turns down the loudness or the fear a bit, because curious, you're just like, oh yeah, let me check this out. Let me see what this is about, and just explore it. And it doesn't have to be quite as fearful, I think, when we approach it that way. So our body's talking to us all the time. It's always trying to get our attention. So the sooner we listen and get curious, the easier things will be. So I love your explanation to that. Thank you. So let's talk about, let's see, you've answered so many of my questions in such a beautiful way. What do you think actually changes when someone stops seeing their skin as an enemy and starts to see it more as a messenger? Is that the entry point, do you think, to healing?
I definitely think that is a big doorway to walk through. Makes me think of I run this program. It's called Calm Mind, Calm Skin, and I had one participant. One of the things that we do inside the program is I have people. We do some drawings, some expressive artwork, and she had drew herself at the very end, and she had said, like, I don't have to be at war with myself anymore.
Oh, wow.
And it was this cute little, she gave me permission to share, so I'm not sharing this without her permission, but she was holding hands with, it was like, she drew an avocado, because we were focusing also on like things that nourish us and things that we love and that brings us joy. And it was this beautiful moment of this realization of like, I'm here with you. I can be with you. I don't have to be at war with you anymore. Oh. And it's that shift in relationship, right? Because skin issues, for the most part, our skin is dynamic. Our bodies are dynamic. For most things, there is no cure for things, right? If you break if you get exposed to poison ivy, okay, it resolves in a couple of weeks. Nice closure there. Yeah. But the vast majority of conditions, there's always the possibility that when our system is, exceeded our capacity to deal, we might see a flare. And so the invitation is, can we, even if our skin doesn't clear, it's changing that relationship. And so that the skin doesn't determine how much of your life that you're willing to participate in, right? You take your autonomy and your agency back, and you realize, okay, I don't have to stop living my life just because I don't have clear skin. That is something that I am experiencing. It is not all of who I am. Yeah. And there are things that I can do to support myself Maybe I go to bed 5 minutes earlier. Maybe I just take, I forget this. What is the word someone said? It was like, yeah, laying on the couch, but it was like kind of like a personal day, but it was, they had this brilliant name for it. I don't remember it at the moment, but it was just such a moment of just like taking what you need for yourself and not feeling guilty or bad about that, right? Your skin is not a metric. What shows up on your skin is not a metric of your worthiness. And unfortunately, we are conditioned as women in a society that values beauty and youth, that we're led to believe that. But there's an opportunity to change the dynamic in the relationship, right? And curiosity and compassion are huge in that. And that, right, oftentimes we need support from another to help us see that. I know I certainly did, until it starts to become something that we can do for ourselves. Right? We are wired for connection. We did not come into this world knowing how to do any of these things ourselves. And we can learn them, and it can make a huge difference.
Wow. Well, that was just beautifully said. From just letting go of the fight to, learning that our value isn't what our skin looks like, and even amongst what you would see on social media and everything, to maybe inviting somebody else in to help us. That's a great segue. I would love to ask you kind of, what does your work look like when somebody comes to work with you? Can you give us a little overview if the listener might be interested?
Yeah. With my background of dermatology, I don't currently prescribe. I prefer to collaborate with colleagues. So when someone comes to work with me, the first thing we do actually is what I call a skin audit, and it's kind of like an exploration of what is the data that's coming in, inside, outside, and in between. Like, what is the load, the intensity, the duration, the frequency of it that may be putting a stress and strain on your physiology that is going to impact your mood, your thoughts, and what shows up on the surface of the skin. So we kind of do a deep dive there. And oftentimes people come to me, they think it's about their skin, right? They've been breaking out hives or rosacea. They've done the mold detox. They've done the elimination diet. They've been on every supplement. And quickly after we've kind of done this audit and looked for maybe some things, lifestyle changes that may be supportive, we see the patterns of when the flares happen, the patterns that are keeping them stuck in that hypervigilance. Because unfortunately, I think functional medicine is amazing, and it can also, and this optimization, when we're in this world of longevity and everything, optimize your hormones. Yes, that's important, but skincare can become skin surveillance, which can quickly turn into hypervigilance. And so unfortunately, a lot of these protocols are adding more stress and strain. So we start to look at patterns of like, what is keeping that cycle going for you? And once we kind of establish that, we start stocking their toolbox with helping them learn, okay, well, where on the elevator? What floor am I on? And when do I go there? And what are the tools, skills, and resources I need to meet myself there? So we start building their somatic skincare toolbox for them.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's great to have a toolbox all the time. Yeah. So if someone is interested in working with you, just would you recommend they check out your website, or what's the best way to learn more about you?
Yeah. My website is a great place, Dr. Keira Barr. Getting a little bit more regular on social media, but one of the best places is I created this guide, a free guide, and I called it the Stress Relief for Skin Relief Guide. But it really explains a lot of what we just talked about, the nervous system elevator, and 3 simple tools that you can implement right away to help with the stress, the anxiety, the overwhelm. So you can start to learn for yourself, okay, this is what it feels like, and I can feel this shift. So I always love to invite people to get that free guide, because it really gives a different perspective on skincare in general, and also gives them something they can use right away to get some relief.
We can link to that in the show notes. If you want to send that to me, that'd be amazing. Thank you for that. Sounds like exactly what everyone will want to hear. So I have one last question for you, because my podcast is called Push Pause to Heal, and I am on a mission to normalize rest for women. I'd love to ask what your favorite way to push pause is in your life.
Yeah, we just moved to the high desert, and part of that decision was to be able to pause. I was in an environment where I couldn't get outside very much. So I know that rest, oftentimes we think of as stillness, but for me, rest is in movement and in motion. So getting out on the trails, being in nature, hearing the birds, is really how I push pause. And it's very restorative, because movement and being outside, it allows my brain to just kind of quiet down. My brain is very chatty, so it turns it down quite a bit.
I love that. I love that so much. You're not alone in the chatty brain, by the way. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Keira. And if I would ask the listener, if today's podcast resonated with you, there were such good tips and reframes and, just some tools that you can put into action right away, that I'd ask that you could help share this podcast with friends, family, anybody that you might know who's maybe suffering with their skin or just any health concern. Help Dr. Keira and myself, expand this health knowledge to help everyone listening. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.